I'll unmute that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katasha Edwards, and I'm the Real-Time Early Access to Literacy Program Manager. And we're excited to have each of you here to join us this afternoon to talk a little bit about the summer cycle of real-time early access to literacy. So before we get started, we want to launch a poll to poll our audience to see your experiences with Real thus far. So the question is, what has your school system's participation in the Real program? Students from your school have received tutoring from Real service providers during this cycle? Has your school system been a service provider? Did you not participate during the spring and are going to participate during summer, or are you still unsure and you want to get some more information today? So we kind of gave everyone a chance to complete that poll, and we're going to end the polling to see where we are today. And it looks like we're pretty evenly matched across the different categories. So hopefully we'll be able to, during our questions, have some people that have participated share some information with us, and some people that still have questions at the end. Hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions today. So we're going to move into the agenda for today. Now, so our agenda for today, we're going to do a program overview. We're going to look at some Real success. We're going to explore some changes with the Real program. We're going to talk about the allocations and the EGMS system, the school system's role in Real, the student registration process, the summer cycle timeline, school systems as providers, and resources that may help you with implementation of the program.
Hi, so let's just go ahead and give us a program overview of the Real program. We know that we need to prioritize literacy. It has definitely been one of the focuses of the Louisiana Department of Education, and we just recently released updated guidance and a literacy initiative. So early literacy is a critical predictor of educational and lifelong success. There have been several studies that have found that when students are not proficient readers by the end of third grade, that they are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And in fact, 88% of students who failed to earn a high school diploma were actually struggling readers in third grade. Research shows that 1 in 10 students who are behind in reading at the end of first grade will struggle to keep up with their peers later on. And we all know that COVID-19 has definitely exacerbated all of those things and widened those achievement gaps. So Louisiana believes that children are our highest priority, families are our partners, educators are valued and as professionals, graduates must be ready, equity matters, choice expands opportunities, schools are invaluable to communities, and our future is bright. So the department released the following belief statements that very much align with the focus of the REAL program. And by providing our kiddos with increased access to technology and the supports that are needed to reach literacy goals, we are increasing student access, student success, and student achievement. And it also shows very much close alignment to the department's critical goals and our educational priorities, making sure that students are ready for kindergarten and beyond, graduating on time, and ready to enter college or career readiness. Okay, I mentioned a second ago about our new literacy initiative. So our literacy initiative is for all Louisiana students to have improved literacy outcomes through high quality instruction and interactions by an effective teacher supported by leaders and families. So if this happens, we know that we'll see literacy gains and we will continue to monitor those goals. We want very much to improve, to have those high quality core instruction for literacy instruction, but also that explicit intervention or extension, which is in fact what the REAL program does. Support teachers with ongoing professional growth and then bring families into it, which is another important aspect of REAL, when families are very much a part of the process, engaging with the tutoring service provider. And by going through this program, families are also better prepared to support their students in early literacy. So the real-time early access to literacy, or the REAL program, provides early literacy support for students in pre-K through grade 3. Through REAL, school systems are allocated funding to provide students in pre-K through 3rd grade with technology. This could be devices or connectivity, and also tutoring services from LDOE vetted tutoring service providers. So the REAL program, it's funded by the ESF REM grant, which provides approximately $17 million in total to Louisiana over the course of 3 years, with its sole purpose to improve early literacy outcomes across the state. School systems receive funding to establish literacy tutoring through microgrants accounts for eligible students. And tutoring for REAL participants is provided by those LDOE approved tutoring service providers. So Katasha is going to be talking a little bit more about success in the REAL program. In just a bit. I did get a text about providing a link for the PowerPoint. So we will send out this PowerPoint. I will try to download it and put it in the chat. And then it also will be found in our REAL, on the REAL landing page as soon as the webinar wraps up.
So let's look at some of our REAL success. We had our first tutoring cycle this spring, and we just wrapped that cycle May 8th, May 9th. So this is just some preliminary data that we pulled from that initial cycle. Our REAL tutoring service providers, they scheduled 3,655 tutoring sessions for students across the state of Louisiana during that cycle. You can see the primary focus of those sessions for this first cycle were first and second grade students, with about 1,700 of those sessions scheduled for second graders and about 1,100 of those sessions scheduled for first grade students. The session delivery for the spring sessions were primarily delivered virtually, and with about 2,446 of those sessions scheduled virtually And we had a good number, 1,176 sessions that were scheduled for face-to-face. Here's a breakdown of our partners, our tutoring service providers during the first cycle. We had 8 school systems that served as tutoring service providers, so I wanted to definitely give them a shout out. And we had about 8 private companies that were also tutoring service providers during the first cycle. Here's a list of our school system participants during the first cycle of REAL. Each of the school systems in the bulleted list had students that were registered for services during the REAL initial cycle. So Leslie's going to talk to us about where does REAL fit into your current initiatives.
Hi, so we know that there's a lot of different initiatives going on. REAL should be used to support early literacy tutoring for pre-K through 3rd grade students in conjunction with all the other current initiatives that support learning loss due to the pandemic. So the department recently released guidance the end of March for Achieve and Believe, which had more clear guidance on how school systems could utilize ESSER or ARPA funds related to COVID to support learning loss. Accelerate was given to us as guidance on how we can support students and how we could possibly have a model for a tutoring program. And REAL is kind of tiered down. REAL is more specifically targeted to those pre-K through 3rd grade students in CIR, UIR, A school, and it is literacy focused. So it is more focused than some of the other programs, but it also comes with a funding source. So we have that ESF REM grant that funds what REAL is trying to push out. And right now we just have a little provider spotlight. Canopy Ed is one of our tutoring service providers for the REAL program, and they have scheduled 1,508 sessions during our spring session. They've developed specific models to support school systems with the implementation. So you can see all of the sessions that they've had with the various age groups, along with the school systems that they have worked with. So we are just going to highlight a little bit of the work that Canopy Ed is doing. And I will play that for you guys right now.
Real-time early access to literacy, and I wanted you to share with some of our school systems and possibly our other partners across the state. The first question I have is, what did your instructional model look like with real-time early access to literacy?
So it looked different in different places. At some districts, they would send out like flyers about the program to families, and then families would sign up, and then we would match them with tutors, and they did virtual one-to-one tutoring with the Canopy tutors, and the district wasn't as engaged after getting that initial information out. We had one district that looked very different, where they decided to have an in-person group stay after school and go to the library where they could all have one-to-one Chromebooks. And there they had 20 students who went and they engaged virtually with Canopy tutors, but all together at their school, chaperoned by teachers at the school. A couple places, we also had a model where we would hire teachers who were already on staff at the school who wanted to do one-on-one support with some of their own students. And then we provided training and curriculum materials and systems for recording what they were doing. We provided all that, and then the teachers at their own school ended up working with their own students after school, and they enjoyed that a lot. We also had the teachers at their own school model working virtually. So instead of the students staying after, they were working with teachers at their own school, but they were doing it virtual one-on-one after families went home. And then in terms of the virtual one-to-one tutoring that we had at a number of districts, the communication with the district varied from place to place. Like I said, some places just sent out the flyer, here's how you show interest in the program, and then we took it from there. Other schools decided to play a more active role and create like Chromebook checkout systems to make sure students had the Chromebooks from school whenever they needed them, and they were touching base and talking with families about it. And so there are a wide range of different ways that we've made it work. Everything from in-person at school to virtual at school to virtual one-on-one.
So it sounds like to me that you guys were able to be pretty flexible and provide foundational early literacy support that match the district's needs and the students' needs.
Right. I mean, a lot of it is knowing what is already happening, right? So, I mean, districts do have plans for their children, but those plans don't normally involve this intensive, one-on-one or like very small group differentiated support. And so talking with them, like, what do you already have going on? What are the resources? Are your own teachers interested in this, or maybe not as much, and you want tutors from elsewhere in the state? And just finding out where districts are at, then we're able to figure out how we can use these resources to add value to the existing plans.
That sounds great. I have one more question. So based on your experience with real-time early access to literacy, do you see other opportunities to continue your relationships that you've established in school systems that will last beyond the life of this grant and this funding?
Yeah, I mean, our first priority is making sure that the real program is a success. But as with everything else, whenever you have a relationship and you're working closely together and you're establishing trust through performing consistently well over time. I think somebody told me that trust is consistency over time, right? And so whenever you have these working relationships and you're doing good work and you're doing it consistently, then naturally conversations start to go to, what else can we do together? And we've gotten to that place with a few of our district partners.
That sounds great. Thank you for sharing with me your experience with real-time early access to literacy.
Thank you. I'm going to stick.
So now we're going to move into some real changes, some changes that are going to be a result of the real program. Experiences from our first spring cycle have provided us an opportunity to make some adjustments to several processes that will improve program efficiency. So if you participated during the spring, these are a few things that are going to change. The group size for face-to-face literacy tutoring, group size with the real program can now be up to 3 students. We know that many school systems that are providers are working this into some program that they have in place for this summer. So that is one of the first changes. The second change is there will be a streamlined registration process. The registration process will begin with the tutoring service providers. Our school systems will provide our eligible students with the registration information, but the provider will initiate that process of registration, which should eliminate the amount of wait time that some of our students have before they can begin their services. And finally, the real portal is in deployment. So school systems will finalize registration by entering those students into the real portal this cycle, instead of those Google Sheets that we used during the initial cycle. So the next section is about the allocations and the e-grants management system. School systems who did not participate in the real program in the spring will need to complete the EGMS application for real-time early access to literacy. So once a school system agrees to the contacts and completes the contacts and agrees to the assurances, the application should appear on your homepage in EGMS under Available. You will select the Create button, and then you'll be able to start the application. We ask that all real-time early access to literacy grant applications be completed by May 21st.
We have a few questions.
Here's just the pathway to completing those assurances and contacts. If you're familiar with EGMS, that's the path that you'll take. You'll go to LEA Central Data, you'll go to Assurances, Formula Assurances, and you should have a tab under Real-Time Early Access to Literacy Assurances, and the same thing with contacts. You would go to Contact Information, Formula Contacts, and Real-Time Early Access to Literacy. Under the NonPublics tab, here's a little more guidance about completing that tab. In 1B and 2C, you're going to enter 0. This is because the real funding is not available for NonPublics. It's currently allocated to schools with the label CIR and UIR-A, and currently NonPublics do not receive those labels. So when you do your NonPublics information, you will not need to share these funds with your non-public. Here's a sample expenditure description and itemization. For school systems that are not providers, the only object code that you can utilize for this current application is 300. And it would be used for tutoring services from an LDOE approved list of tutoring service providers for students in pre-K through grade 3. For school systems that are providers, we're going to provide some additional information to you a little bit later. But for school systems that are not providers, the only object code within EGMS that you can utilize is object code 300. They do have some other object codes available, but the only applicable one for this current application is object code 300. Now, if you've already completed your EGMS application and you're wondering where your summer allocation funds are, they've already been loaded into EGMS. So your next steps would be to think of and develop a plan to prioritize early literacy tutoring for those eligible students, and then to complete an amendment in EGMS reflective of the additional funding by May 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So the real school system providers, your application in EGMS is a little bit different. And there's some additional information that we want to provide for those school systems that are providers. So we're hosting a webinar next Wednesday, May 12th at 2 p.m. for all school systems that are providers and all providers in general, to give you a little bit more information about the changes and expectations for providers during the summer cycle.
Okay, we received a few questions during that section, so I'm just going to go over some of the answers. So one of the first questions was, so parents are not filling out information for this cycle as well in the portal. Parents will be filling out information directly from the tutoring service providers. So each tutoring service provider is going to have a link to a form, and families will be entering in their information within that form. And then the school systems will check eligibility and just finalize the registration within the portal. At this point, parents aren't able to access the portal. A question was about, why is the hourly rate lower if the group size is larger? That was a per pupil amount. So the per pupil amount is reduced because you are in a group with more students, but the average pay, but the pay for that tutoring service provider will be higher because it will be multiple students. is the year 21 or 22. I'm guessing this is within EGMS. So this is the same application in EGMS as the spring application. So this will be the 21 application. We are in the process of building out a new application that will hold the 21-22 school year allocations. So the summer cycle, you will use the same EGMS application. We've just added additional funding to that application. And you'll have a new application in the 22 year with next school year's funds. So that's another question was, will funds that were not used in the initial grant roll over? So funds that were not used during the spring cycle, we're still using the same EGMS application. So those funds will remain. So you'll have any funds that were not spent during the spring cycle remaining. And then in addition to that, we will add the funds that were received, that were given during April BESI into that same application.
They can hire employees if they are approved tutoring service providers.
You can hire employees to staff the tutoring if you apply to become a tutoring service provider. So there is links, an RFA that is out, an application to fill out to become a tutoring service provider, and we will share that application with you. And
There was another question. They wanted to know how long it was going to be until they were approved as a provider. That we're working through those this week, and they should know by the end of the week.
Okay.
But most school systems have that.
okay. Another question we received was, how do we know if we are approved to be a tutoring service provider for the summer cycle? So we're in the process this week of reviewing those applications, and you should be hearing back by the end of this week. If any additional information is needed to complete your application. Does it roll past June 30th into fiscal year 22?
The current application is stretched until they move on to July.
The current application is stretched and it will be available until July 23rd. And then for the next school year, you will be using the new application found in fiscal year 2022.
One more thing that I would add to that about the EGMS questions, the funds are available until July 23rd. That's the end of the summer cycle. And any funds that are unused at the end of the summer cycle will be recaptured, and they will be used to be reallocated for year 3 funding. So any school systems that don't utilize their funds by the end of this summer cycle, we will recapture those funds. We will reallocate those for subsequent cycles. And we will, it won't necessarily go back to the school system that it was recaptured from. It will be dispersed among school systems that have participated in the program. So the next thing is the school system's role in REAL. Oh, there's one more question. If a provider for the spring, no, you do not have to do a new application for the summer. Once you've been approved as a provider, you are a tutoring service provider. And I think there was a note about a school system that wasn't added to the provider catalog yet. I sent out a link earlier this week. So all of those links will be used to update that service provider guide to make sure that it's all inclusive of all of our tutoring service providers that have been approved. There's one more question. Is it too late for a school system to apply as a tutoring service provider? The deadline was April 30th, but if your school system is interested, I want you to send me an email and we'll figure out something, because we really do want our school systems to do this work, if they are in a position to do it. So here's one more question about invoicing. So yes, the tutoring service provider will invoice the school system. The school system will pay the provider and request reimbursement in EGMS. That is correct. So these are great questions. So now I think the biggest question is, and the biggest emails that I've received, what are the school system's role in this program? So we're gonna outline real. So here are just an outline of the school system's responsibilities with real-time early access to literacy. The first initial responsibility will be the completion of the EGMS application for real-time early access to literacy. And then you're gonna identify eligible students. And these are your students that are enrolled in pre-K through grade 3 in CRR, URA schools, and provide their families with registration information. And a little bit later, that information is gonna be available to school systems next week. So, and just, I know you're looking at your allocation and you know that you don't have enough funds to fund every student that is eligible. So you'll begin internally looking at your literacy goals and your data and identifying which populations of students that you would like to target with these funds. Once you have given that registration to the provider, to the families, those families are going to begin that registration with the provider. The provider is going to provide your school system with a list of kids who've registered with them. And at that point, the school system will match that student to their LACID number and really just deem them as eligible. Like, this is a kid that attends my school and they are eligible to receive these funds. And by uploading them into the real portal, you are verifying their eligibility. Once that process is done, that provider is going to reach back out to those parents with the contact information that they already have because they began the registration process with the provider and they're going to begin those sessions. So the next thing for the school system to do would be just to make payments to the providers and ensure that providers complete all school system requirements that you may have for contract services and data sharing. And at the end of this responsibility, you're going to request for reimbursement within the EGMS system. So how do you prioritize? How do you figure out who you're going to target with the allocations that you've received? There are several factors that school systems should take into consideration when making a decision about student grant amounts. School systems should begin by developing an overall strategy for implementation. So things that you should consider are the number of weeks in the tutoring cycle, the per hour cost of a tutoring session, the number of students in the target population, and the frequency of those tutoring sessions. And then for this summer cycle, we have a suggested grant amount of a minimum of $500 because this would provide a student that's in an individual group about 12 hours of tutoring across that 9-week period. We know that this could vary, if students are in small groups and they are receiving it in groups with 3-to-1 and 2-to-1, but that's just a suggested amount. It's not a required amount. So for example, a school system with an allocation of $10,000 could decide to provide about 20 of their students with a $500 grant. Each student will receive about 12 hours of tutoring over the 9-week tutoring cycle. So here's the student registration process. And I kind of talked through this when I was on the school system role. Eligible families are going to receive their registration information from the school system. Families are going to choose from a library of qualified tutoring service providers by completing a registration link for their preferred provider. So we're in the process, like we just finalized the application period for tutoring service providers, and we're updating that provider guide. And within that provider guide, there will be links embedded directly to those providers. And providers will submit interested students' registration submissions to the school system for eligibility. So once those providers receive that information, they're going to in turn give it back to the school system, and the school system will verify eligibility and finalize enrollment in the program by registering those students in the real portal and designating micro grants per eligible student during each cycle. Upon completion of the eligibility verification, the tutoring service provider will reach out directly to that family and they will begin scheduling those sessions. Great question. Someone popped in, what is the timeline for getting this all done? I think that's one of our next slides is our timeline for the summer cycle. Before we get to that, we'll talk about access to the portal because this is new for this summer. I have a link to the real registration portal within this PowerPoint. So each school system will have to identify a person or persons that are responsible for student eligibility verification and enrollment. Users can have two roles. They can be a district staff role or a school counselor role. If you designate someone with the district staff role, they can upload and enroll students across the entire district. But if you deem that you would like for individual schools to help with this enrollment and registration, then you would submit for them a school counselor role, and they would only be able to upload for their specific school. We ask that each school system complete the real portal user account request form. It's linked in this presentation by May 19th. And once I receive those requests, we're going to make sure your person will receive an email for them to reset their password. And we're also going to release some student registration and enrollment guidance by May 12th that will give you more information about the portal. So the next thing is the summer cycle timeline. So here's just a breakdown of what the summer cycle will look like, when things are due, when things should be done. And we've highlighted in yellow because I know it seems like a lot by the time we go between these two slides, what the school system's responsibilities will be within the summer cycle. So you see on May 12th, we'll have that updated tutoring service provider guide with all of our new providers embedded within the guide, available for you to provide access to your families. There will be school recruitment and student recruitment. Your families are going to reach out to those providers via the links that are within the tutoring service provider guide and begin that registration process. We have student eligibility verification and student enrollment between May 13th and May 21st. And that's where your person from your school system that's designated will go in and verify eligibility and complete the enrollment process. May 17th through the 21st, student tutoring sessions will be scheduled. Our providers will be reaching directly out to those families and scheduling those sessions. May 24th through July 23rd is our cycle, and that our tutoring sessions will begin the week of May 24th. June 30th, we're asking each school system to, each tutoring service provider is going to provide you with an invoice for services through June 27th. And we ask that each school system submit an initial PER within EGMS reflective of those services provided through June 27th. We have our pre and post literacy assessment that will take place throughout the cycle. And then July 30th, this is another important date. We're asking that all of our providers provide you with their final invoices by July 30th. And then by August 15th, you're going to request for reimbursement and submit your final PER within EGMS. And that will close out this application within EGMS. So here are our next tutoring cycles. We have our current summer cycle, and then we've already looked ahead to the fall cycle, September 6th through December 5th. And we've looked at our spring cycle of 2022, which will be January 30th through April 30th. Here's some resources that may be helpful when you're thinking about real-time early access to literacy. There's a link to our real landing page, which is our website. Some previous webinars just for your reference, but we know that some things have changed since we completed the first cycle. The tutoring service provider request for application. I know we had a couple of school systems that are interested in completing that RFA, and also a link to the online application. And there's a link to the current tutoring service provider guide. And this link will be updated with our new guide. So once our guide is updated for summer, this current link will reflect the new vendor guide. And coming soon, which is very soon, next week, you will have some real portal student registration and enrollment guidance. So if you want to know more about real-time early access to literacy, and you will be attending the Teacher Leader Summit, and you want an opportunity to kind of chat with some other participants and hear some more information about implementation models that were used during the spring cycle, we do have one session on real-time early access to literacy that will be repeated 3 times during the Teacher Leader Summit. So now we're at the questions, and I see a couple of questions that are in the chat. If the district participates in the spring, but not the summer, will they be eligible in the fall? Now yes, the answer is yes. Well, we're currently getting those allocations for fall ready right now. They're actually due next week. And what we've done is we've looked at the super app responses related to real-time early access to literacy, along with some other factors, and we're getting ready to submit those allocations to Bessie for June. And at that point, your school system will know their allocation for fall. Is it mandatory that we participate? The short answer is no, it's not mandatory. But the long answer that I'm about to give is that we really are encouraging school systems that even if you're not interested in becoming a provider, that you would make these resources available, to some of your eligible population, because we've received, a high volume of interest from families across the state, and it would be ideal if there was enough funding for us to provide for all eligible students. But we're just asking school systems to target a portion of their eligible population with this funding. Do we have any other questions at this time? I know we have a couple of providers that are on the call. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if you were a provider and you would like to unmute, you could raise your hand or unmute and maybe give a little information or not. I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
We did have another question. When do the summer sessions take place? Time during the day. So it is up to the school system, or it's up to the student who is working alongside with the tutoring service provider about when they offer it. So that's one of the great things about the REAL program is it's supposed to make it easier for the families and for the students. And there's no mandated time of the day when it should occur, but there is that window that Katasha mentioned earlier of when that funding should be utilized. Yes, for registering for portal access, there's a link on this deck, and Katasha is going to put it in the chat. I think I actually did earlier. And it's also on the REAL landing page, and you will register. I think it's just providing your name and email account and your role so that Katasha can set up accounts on the portal for your name. What if the student has summer school already? Do they work with students in the evening as well? If the students would like additional supplemental tutoring, yes, that could be an option. Some school systems have even partnered up with a tutoring service provider so that the tutoring service provider will provide the tutoring during those summer school hours.
And some of the school systems that are providers are providing those.
And some of our school systems that are approved tutoring service providers for REAL or utilizing REAL funding to provide tutoring, individualized tutoring during the school day for summer school to their own students. Yes, students that participated in the spring cycle are also eligible to participate in the summer. And I know that we've been putting money and funding and allocations into EGMS for our school systems, but we know that this is different than the types of allocations that school systems typically receive, because these allocations are so centered as micro grants for the students. We are anticipating many of our systems not to utilize all of the funding that was provided. And I'm going to provide a download for the deck right now, and it will also be posted on the website.
So here's a question. Could we clarify one more time about registering for portal access? And I think Leslie just talked through that. The link will be, I will send it out to all the contacts that I sent out the allocation notices to in a reminder email. It will be on the real landing page, and it will be, I asked that it be complete. It's not due May 12th. The portal guidance will be available May 12th. So you'll have more information about how to register. Just step-by-step links and step-by-step information on May 12th. I want to unmute C. Wallace to share a little bit about the impact from Rio this summer.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Edwards. This is Cindy Wallace with Quest Testing, and we had the opportunity to work with Bossier Parish this cycle 1, and the impact has been tremendous. We feel like we've had great participation from the families. We've had families asking for services from other parishes as well. They've reached out personally to our company, and the gratefulness, I think, of the families that we've seen, they're just grateful that somebody is there providing services, and that's due to the leadership of Dr. Bourgeois over in Bossier and her fantastic staff and team that has been made possible for their parish. But just wanted to give a shout out to them and just let you know that if you're thinking about doing it, whether you're doing it as a school system or thinking about partnering with somebody, it has been a tremendous success. And very much appreciated by the families. So thank you, Ms. Edwards, for all of your hard work as well.
And I know that Katasha mentioned the Teacher Leader Summit. So we're hoping to capture, I heard the measuring the impact and the success. Yes, so we're hoping to capture the impact and the success of our most recent spring cycle and share some of that information during Teacher Leader Summit. We'll also post that deck online. So some of the tools that we've been using to measure the beginning of each cycle, our tutoring service providers administer a single measure of the Dibble screener. And then at the end of the cycle, they measure students again using that same measure. So we're using that to measure the effectiveness of the overall literacy gains. And then there's also a family survey that was sent out that asks families for their input at the beginning of the tutoring cycle and then at the end as well. So we'll be looking at a couple of different data points just to gauge whether or not this first cycle it has been beneficial. And of course, we learn something new every time, and all of our upcoming cycles will definitely work out some of those kinks and make it even more successful than the last.
So before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined the call today, and for all of our school systems that have participated, have been providers, or all of our school systems that are signed up and they're ready to take the charge and become a participant for this upcoming cycle to make foundational literacy tutoring available to our youngest littles. I think that's what I'm most excited about, is that we're able to make these resources available for our very youngest kids. So I just wanted to definitely make sure that I tell everyone thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't share with you, as I meet with providers and school systems throughout this process, it has lended itself for many opportunities to problem solve. So I don't think that it won't be opportunities to problem solve as we move forward, but I thank everybody for being flexible and just kind of going with this process so that we've been able to make these services available for our students so far. And just a shout out to Louisiana in general with this funding. We are one of 2 states that were provided this grant with this literacy focus, and we're the only one who began this spring. So we receive kudos for just stepping out and going ahead to begin. So we're excited about our impact on our youngest learners. So if you have any questions, you can email me. Many of the people know that I give my cell phone number out. So I can text you, call you, email you. We just want to make sure that I'm available to help you make this program a success.